Hi, I'm John Gallagher. I'm Vice President of IoT Labs, and I want to spend a few minutes here just talking about what I think is one of the more critical and important efforts going on in the U.S., which is there's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month every October, and it's if you're not familiar with National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're in the 20th year of it. We started this in 2004. It's sponsored by CISA, which is part of DHS, and also the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And it really provides an important grounding, I think, every October as to how not just individuals, but industry, and it's a collaborative effort between government and industry to raise cybersecurity awareness broadly. And it really ensures that people have not just the attention given to it, but also resources and best practices and tips and training to be and remain safe and secure when you're online or using internet connected devices, which we all do. And that's really what today's topic's about from the Viaku perspective, which is that it's not about, personal cybersecurity. That's obviously very important, but it's about enterprise security, and specifically the unmanaged and undiscovered devices that exist broadly within your organization: IoT, OT, ICS, a variety of non-traditional IT systems that are all internet connected and therefore present a cyber threat to your organization. And, for what it's worth, the largest and fastest growing part of the threat landscape has been and continues to be those devices, the IoT, OT, and ICS systems. And since we started the Cybersecurity Awareness Month in 2004, a lot has changed, right? There's 100x more known cyber vulnerabilities than there were in 2024. The cost of a cyber attack has risen to about over 10 trillion in total to organizations. The frequency of attacks has gone from once every 7 minutes to roughly once every 8 seconds. And, we've had a huge upgrowth. And again, that's really going to be our topic today is how to defend and protect and secure your IoT and OT infrastructure, because that's where the growth has happened in the threat landscape, whether it's threat actor groups like Salt Typhoon and Flax Typhoon and others, or nation states that have acted to subvert their opponents' infrastructure through IP cameras, through routers, through other devices, or whether it's hacktivist groups who take aim at organizations of all types and view the IoT attack surface as a good entry point into it. So regardless of how you're going to approach this problem, please understand that these numbers, having a distinct focus on the level of threat this is to your organization, that's a great starting point to building awareness around IoT and IoT threats. And as we look at the enterprise, right, we obviously see data centers, laptops, computers, mobile devices, and so forth. And those are wonderful in the sense that they're typically very protected devices. They're secured. They're within a tightly confined data center. You have Windows and Linux-based security solutions that are very mature and been around for a long time. The problem is that's about, 1/5, 1/10, 1/20th your overall attack surface. The bulk of it is the IoT, OT, and ICS devices that are sprawled across your organization. And as we look at those types of devices, I'll spend the next few minutes going through what makes them different from IT systems and some of the aspects of that difference that helps to approach securing them and making them cyber hygiene ready. And but again, as you look at the organizational landscape, you're going to see whether it's video surveillance, access control, factory systems, smoke detectors, building automation, HVACs, IP lighting, etc. Many of these systems are what really is the threat. And having October as the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, to me personally, it adds a dimension. October is scary, right? It has Halloween. For many organizations, it's the last quarter of the year, last chance to make your numbers. And also in 2024, it brings elections, and that's maybe an interesting pivot to not talk about traditional enterprise IoT systems, but IoT systems of another form, like election systems. And this is a quick comparison that I did. We often talk about IoT systems with respect to routers, printers, cameras, various other forms of devices that you see sprawled across the enterprise. But those types of IoT systems, you'll see some commonality. Those IoT systems typically involve multiple devices, applications, and transfer across the network. Take a look at an IP camera. You start with the camera itself, but then you have video management software, you have operating systems, you have servers that it's going across, it's going into storage. Maybe that storage is even tiered or handled in certain ways. All of those are important because at the end of the day, the goal of that IoT application, video surveillance, is making sure that what's captured at the camera end is then received into storage and is retrievable and usable as evidence. Now let's look at election systems. Not so different, right? You go from voting machines through a variety of network or other interfaces. You go to vote counting software. You typically have a couple of different checks across that. You'll go into storage. You'll have the ability to retain it. You have the same chain of custody aspect that you have. So, to me, in a broad sense, these IoT systems, as you look across your organization, don't just pigeonhole them into the core ones that I mentioned initially. Many of the systems that you rely on, even if you're in an election office, are typically IoT systems. And those multiple technologies that make an election are also things that make an IoT system work, and they're also things that make them insecure, right? The network connectivity, having a variety of locations that are outside of centralized control, etc. So, again, I think October being the month for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, even in 2024, is even more important because it brings home the nature of these systems. And let me go a little deeper into that point, which is that when you look at IoT or OT systems, right, they're needing to be operational, visible, and secure, but they rely on having hidden network segments and not being visible to the outside. That's one of the basic practices, which of course we strongly encourage, is that all of your IoT systems should be on segmented or hidden networks or VLANs, so that your lateral movement, should there be an attack or should there be a compromise of those devices, that the lateral movement of a threat actor is very limited in that case. And it's also making it easier to remediate and mitigate that compromise. So having a system where you can look at your overall environment really requires having a sense of not just the devices themselves, but also the applications that manage them, and also the networks that they travel on. And that network enablement is something that's very important also. Another best practice is to move towards zero trust. Zero trust involves things like making sure that the devices themselves are authenticated, and that the devices have some ability to be authenticated. It also means that the network segment that it's on should be contained within a trust area, a trust zone, where every device and application communicating within it is a trusted system. So making sure that you have visibility of devices, applications, and networks, all three of those together, is critical to making sure that they're fully secured. And as we, again, look at the overall topology here, the other best practice is to make sure that the teams operating these systems, they're typically not IT. Make sure that those teams communicate and talk to each other. A recent discussion with one of the key analysts at Gartner, she really highlighted a term which I love, which is federated. And just as we talk about data within an organization or other systems or practices becoming federated, having your security practices for IoT get federated across different business groups is really a powerful concept, and one that I think will help organizations to achieve better security around their IoT infrastructure. So again, seeing this picture, I think, spend a little time on it, pause the video if you wish. But what we really are seeing here is that IoT is a little different than IT, because again, the nature of it being distributed, managed by different groups, having different communication networks, securing those networks differently. So it's a different class of security problem that often will require different tools. So what I'd like to switch to is some of the basic practices and how they get adapted to the IoT specific nature that we just talked about. So if we look at the IoT guidance, or sorry, the consumer guidance that's given during this month by CISA and by the National Cybersecurity Alliance, what you find, oops, sorry about that. What you find is that those consumer-based best practices can easily be translated into enterprise. You just have to think it through a little bit. And let's do that together in the next couple minutes. So if you think of the guidance, right, use strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, recognize and report phishing, and update software. Some of this applies very directly to enterprise systems, some of it does not. And so I would just translate some of these. When you say use strong passwords, in the enterprise, almost every organization that we work with, and we work with Fortune 50s all the way through mom and pop organizations, virtually all of them have an InfoSec policy. They have policies around password management and guidance as to what a strong password is. So that's not the issue in an enterprise. The issue is enforcement, making sure that all of those device passwords are maintained to that corporate spec, to that InfoSec policy. Likewise, turning on MFA. If your systems enable it, of course, it's always a best practice. But in the enterprise, especially with IoT, not all systems actually support MFA, nor is it actually as relevant as it would be for example, protecting a bank account. So in the case of IoT, I would just translate that a little bit into, you need to ensure that all device identities are authenticated. Every device you should never have a rogue device in your operation, or one that is able to connect to a network without it being a proven trusted entity to be on that network. And so the mechanism for doing that in IoT systems is to use certificates, 802.1x or TLS certificates. And that's, again, something that we'll dive into in a little bit, showing some of how that happens. But ensuring that all of your systems that support certificates are using them is really a good way to make sure that authentication and device integrity is happening. Recognizing and reporting phishing. Well, in the enterprise, that's happening all the time. I used a metric earlier of every 8 seconds, there's some form of attack. And in many ways, look at a DDoS attack, which is hundreds of thousands of attack vectors per second, and increasing. And by the way, most of those DDoS attacks are launched out of IoT systems that have bots placed on them that are operating. So ensuring that those device and application interactions are monitored, seeing that you have visibility into some of the traffic patterns, and seeing what's unusual. That's a good tip-off, that you have phishing, that you have unobserved activity happening. I mean, as I mentioned with the DDoS attacks, you really should question and be monitoring for outbound traffic patterns. Why does my, the joke being, why does my refrigerator have a Facebook account? That kind of device behavior should be observed and monitored, and using not even advanced techniques like AI, but simply machine learning and anomaly detection. You really should be able to see when there's abnormal patterns happening, and therefore compromised activity or potentially phishing, and again, a threat actor looking for ability to move laterally into your corporate network. So those capabilities also are important, but having a different approach for enterprise versus consumer probably most applies to the phishing aspect of CISA's guidance. And updating software, that's a basic. Having the ability to firmware update or patch all of your devices quickly is your easiest and quickest way to shut down a potential threat. CISA, again, just giving credit where it's due, they put a lot of effort into giving the public visibility into the most current and serious threats that are facing both individuals and enterprises. They have what's called the Known Exploitable Vulnerability, or KEV catalog. And that catalog shows what's currently being exploited by threat actors and the severity of them and what devices or systems that they're operating within. The best way to address what's on the KEV list is to ensure that you have a mechanism for quickly updating the firmware should your device or systems start to appear on that list. And having that automation is important because go back to the picture we showed before where you have a sense of scale, right? You have a mapped out or elaborated set of devices strewn across the enterprise. They may be in parking lots, they may be in multiple buildings, they may be at your geographic locations. So having automation applies to all of these principles here: automatic password enforcement, automatic ability to apply certificates, automated monitoring, but especially to deal with reducing your window of vulnerability, you need to automate the process of firmware and patching and updating, because that will bring your system to the latest and most secure version of firmware and the one that your manufacturer recommends and has verified to enable operability of the system and its security. So getting there as quickly as possible is clearly a goal and a best practice. So when we talk about having strong passwords, right, they should be strong, right? There's technologies like password managers and so forth that enable you to deal with complexity and handle it automatically. So lean into that. Have a method to create and monitor and match your strong passwords to all of your systems, and make sure that they're applied in a good structured way. At Viaku, we have an automated system that allows scheduling. It allows visibility into which devices are currently updated. And it's really, again, that kind of automation that allows you to, at scale, handle this task across all your systems and do it very quickly and with limited numbers of people. CISA recommends turning on multi-factor authentication. So as I mentioned, it might not apply as directly for IoT as it would for personal systems, but it does actually have a meaning in IoT land, which is its authentication, its device identity. It's ensuring you know who you are talking with or communicating with on that network. And that's why old-fashioned attacks that stopped working with IT systems, like man-in-the-middle attacks or rogue devices, those old-fashioned attacks still work for IoT. They've been stopped dead for IT systems for a while. But by enabling threat actors to use proven and well-honed techniques, clearly is a method of compromise. And once a device is compromised because its identity is different from the network perspective than who's controlling it, that allows intercepted traffic, changing of data, planting of deep fakes, a variety of things that are obviously detrimental to an organization's security. And having new forms of threats emerge, we're seeing a lot of activity around deep fakes in a variety of ways, right? Not just data being spoofed or identities being spoofed, but obviously video images and so forth. So stopping that by proving a device identity and who's communicating is important. And this approach of identifying things, it goes back to, as we talked about, but as I should have mentioned, of course, some IoT within your environment is also standalone. And at Viaku, we handle those devices just as easily as we do the tightly coupled systems of device and application and network. So rest assured, all of the things that I'm talking about here today are ones that apply to both what we would call loosely coupled, individual actors, sensors, and so forth, or they apply to the tightly coupled environments that typically predominate in the enterprise. So when we go to finding and discovering these and making sure that you have visibility into all of the devices that exist, it's getting you to an endpoint, right? Having this security journey, this flow Obviously, discovery is the starting point, knowing what you have on your network and knowing what's there. We're very proud of our partnerships with a variety of leading asset discovery vendors who focus on IoT and OT systems as we do. People like Nozomi Networks or Forescout or Clarity or Armis or Order or others, right? And so we applaud the efforts that have been put into organizations deploying asset discovery. Now, in that phase that we're in of the last few years where asset discovery has been deployed, there are some missing pieces. And I'm happy to say Viaku does fill some of those pieces or adds to the data that's needed to address the situation. We do what we call application-based discovery. It's a product we call Direct Query Manager. And it's different from the discovery engines that I'm mentioning here because those discovery engines typically have a inference-based approach. They're listening to network traffic, and through that traffic, they're sensing what the device is and who it is, what it's doing, and so forth. We take a different approach. We do direct query. We're looking through the network and connecting to the devices, the applications, and we're interrogating them in a way that, of course, it's not ping, it doesn't trigger any security alarms, but we are gathering data around those applications and then monitoring their communications flow and metadata changes and so forth. And that gives us a very accurate picture of the device and the applications that are managing them and how that is all working together. That really augments the inference-based discovery approach. So whether you choose to start, as some people do with Viaku's application-based discovery, which will show you everything, of course, or you're currently using a system and you want to augment it with higher accuracy data, both are valid approaches to get to where we need to get to. And that's what's shown on the right-hand side here. You need to both remediate the device security issues, which, as we've talked about, rotating passwords, updating certificates, installing new firmware, and then repatriating them, bringing them back to full network citizenship, making sure that they're acting in the workflow as they need to deliver the value to your organization. And that includes making sure that they're compliant, making sure that they're documented for audits and other purposes, and so that your overall governance of these systems is taken into account. And so whether it's passwords, certificates, I'd like to highlight that has a scheduling aspect. So we make it easy to stay on top of all of those aspects of best practices and what you need to do to secure your systems. And the last one I'll just dwell on a little bit is the patching problem, right? We've talked about passwords, we've talked about certificates. The last one is patching. And IoT presents unique and very special issues when it comes to updating or patching devices. First of all, the biggest is that the patch management solutions you rely on for your IT systems simply don't work for IoT. Those systems rely on agents operating at the device level to do their job. Well, IoT systems, you can't put software onto the devices. Those are closed systems. They're using unique operating systems, and there's no landing pad, so to speak, for a Windows or a Linux application typically within them. So you have to go to an agentless solution like Viaku offers. Another reason that they're hard to do is the line of business typically controls the devices, not IT. And so there's many other demands on a physical security team, a facilities team, a manufacturing team, logistics or transport. Many other functions within the company operate at a different cadence and a different priority than the security team might or IT team might. You also have to ensure that everything is distributed in a way that the line of business is able to absorb. Many organizations will dictate from IT what the line of business needs to do, but they don't always have the solution to enable them to do that. So that's where again, I would just say the difficulty in patching sometimes comes from you need to patch, but you don't have an effective mechanism to do it. Application dependencies, right? One of the most common situations we run into is when you update firmware, sometimes the devices don't accept that level of firmware with the application software, vice versa. So you have to make sure that all elements of your system are able to come back together, the repatriation approach that I mentioned. And those application dependencies also can be things like passwords. Very, very common in the IoT world is that the application controlling a device will need that device's password to communicate and control it. So having a password update to the device without updating the application doesn't work. So having a system where both are being done at the same time is, of course, very important. And as we mentioned with the repatriation compliance requirements, sometimes patching devices is hard because it goes against things like scheduled uptime, or scheduled downtime for maintenance and so forth. So having compliance in a broad sense is different from IT. And in IoT operations, they do really factor in heavily. And compliance might also include things like having a chain of custody, as I mentioned earlier, so that you know exactly who and when and what was happening with that data flow as it progressed through the system. Um, and so that's why, again, things like firmware updates have to be done on a scheduled basis. You need visibility into how many of your systems still need updating and so forth. And making that patching process, which again, I would say is probably the most difficult of what we've talked about, making that work requires the type of automation that you'd see here on the screen, the ability to schedule, visualize, and set things at a device or system level. And so just to kind of conclude or start to wrap up here, the one thing which I will want to leave you with is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month every October. Doesn't mean that it's every October you need to pay attention. It's going to happen all of the time, and that's why we're here at VIACU to help you whenever you're ready. Every organization has a different schedule and priority around IoT security. So that's why, again, if you're researching this, watching this video to get a sense as to what some of the best practices are, this is just a short snippet. I'd really encourage you, go to the VIACU website, sign up for a demo, talk to one of our experts for a half hour, and you'll get some good insight as to how we've helped large organizations. I mean, we've worked with organizations that have millions of devices down through to tens or dozens of devices. So whether you're again, a Fortune 50 or Fortune 10, doesn't matter to us. We're able to have a discussion which I think will lead to good value and help with your security concerns. And just to quickly cover our product offering that supports that, it's really the direct query manager that I mentioned that delivers high accuracy visibility into your assets. Once you have that, then you can do things like rapid patching through our device firmware manager. You can manage credentials and device authentication through our password manager and certificate manager. And we also do monitoring in a very basic sense. We create a digital twin where we're sensing the metadata within your system and capturing that. And then we can do historical analysis, machine learning. We can do fix-it plans if a failure occurs. We alert when a failure occurs. So there's lots of benefit that come from just simply the observability that we offer and the service assurance aspects of that. So, you know, with VIACU, we've created a really complete platform for IoT and CPS, cyber physical system security. It's a true protection platform, as it starts with the asset discovery and goes all the way through vulnerability assessment, remediation, and repatriation. And underlying it all is the service assurance aspect, because you don't want to be operating on or managing systems that are dysfunctional to begin with. So with that, let me just wrap it up. I hope this has whet some appetite, again, spurs further discussion. But the key messages I'd leave actually for today, and what I think will help with your National Cybersecurity Awareness Month efforts in general, they're all elements of building a strong cybersecurity culture within the IoT line of business organizations, the non-IT people. And what does that mean? It means, first of all, the federation of knowledge and information within your company. Collaborate and communicate, right? People shouldn't live in silos or believe that their team has to individually solve IoT security. It's a team sport. It's a group effort. And the benefit to the organization is from everyone managing their systems to a high level and to best practices. So having communication and federation of that knowledge is really important. Use very basic cybersecurity training. That's a key one, right? Whether it's even for helping individuals with their personal lives and protecting their home lives. And home and office get blurred more than ever these days. So having basic cybersecurity training helps your staff to have their antenna out as to security issues, and also might even help them with their um, personal security issues. Identifying and making available cybersecurity training resources. There's lots of good training through professional organizations. I'm part of a few different groups that operate at industry levels. A good example might be the Security Industry Association, SIA. I'm part of the Cybersecurity Advisory Board for SIA, and we've moved in the last few years to a number of different resources and training materials. There's even a certification on cybersecurity specific to the physical security domain, and you'll find that in other industries as well. So staying current on cybersecurity events and incidents is another great thing. I hate to put it this way, but almost every single day, there is something in the news that relates to IoT security or the threat landscape that impacts organizations who operate IoT systems. So staying current on those, sharing knowledge about them, simply even discussing them, helps to put a mindset out there of building a strong cybersecurity culture and awareness about what could be a potential threat. And finally, encouraging employees to make good choices online and learning about risk. Make it something that isn't a silent or hidden thing. Use employee quizzes, tests. Don't shame people publicly, of course, but have the regularity of giving some and there's online resources to help with this, tests that raise awareness around phishing, business email compromise, and so forth. So encouraging employees to know those practices and make good choices online. That'll ripple into the business and the overall IoT security that you're aiming for. So with that, I'd like to thank you. I hope this webinar was actually of use, spurred some ideas. If it did, please reach out. John Gallagher at viaku.com. You can reach me through LinkedIn. And again, I'd encourage you, go to viaku.com, our website, go to the upper right-hand corner. There's a request to demo, talk to an expert link. I click on that, schedule a good 30-minute discussion, and I think it'll help to overall improve your security posture and reduce your IoT attack surface. So with that, thank you again, and best wishes for continued success with your IoT security. Thank you.